Introduction to Ionic. In this video, we are going to learn what is the Ionic framework, and we will also have a look at the mock-up of the application that we'll be building later in this course. Ionic framework is an open source UI toolkit for building mobile applications using web technologies like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So if you are a web developer and you have been building web applications using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, then you can build mobile applications as well using the Ionic framework. The latest version of Ionic framework is version 4. Ionic framework was initially developed by Max Lynch, Ben Sperry, and Adam Bradley of Drifty Corporation. The first version of Ionic came out in 2013, which was built on top of AngularJS and Apache Cordova. As an update to AngularJS was released by the Google team called Angular 2, Ionic also released a major update called Ionic 2 that used Angular 2 as the backing framework. With this, Ionic also switched to TypeScript as the primary programming language because Angular 2 used TypeScript. As of now, the current version of Ionic framework is version 4, which is better than ever. Let's have a look at what is new in Ionic version 4. Ionic 4 is one of the biggest updates the Ionic team has made to Ionic in a long time. The most important and significant change is that Ionic 4 is built using web components. It means that you can use Ionic components right out of the box. The complete framework only comprises of a style sheet file and a script file that you can put into your project and you are good to go. You don't need any build process to compile your application. With web components, your application performs better than ever. Ionic 4 makes use of CSS variables, which allows you to have dynamic styling in your components. Also, Shadow DOM ensures that your styles do not leak. So the styles of one component do not affect the styles of other components. Lastly, Ionic 4 is framework agnostic. It means that with Ionic, you can use any JavaScript framework of your choice. If you do not prefer using a framework, you can start building your application with Ionic framework without having to use any backing JavaScript framework. You can use vanilla JavaScript to build your application. However, Ionic is tightly integrated with Angular. If you know Angular, then you can use Angular to build your Ionic applications. Integration with more frameworks is work under progress. And in the future, we are likely to have integrations with React and Vue as well. There are a few reasons why integration of Ionic with Angular is advantageous. The primary reason of integrating Ionic with Angular is that we get access to the Angular CLI and the Angular build process. You can configure the Angular build process and Angular takes care of everything. Secondly, Ionic 4 uses Angular Router to configure navigation within the app. Angular Router also takes care of lazy loading our Ionic components, which not only makes our application faster, but also makes its performance better. Lastly, Angular has such a huge community of developers around the world that if you face any problem, you are likely to find a solution to your problem with a simple Google search. Ionic 4 uses Apache Cordova to get access to the native APIs. So if you want to access the phone's camera, or if you want to get access to the device's GPS, you can do that using Apache Cordova. This is made possible with the help of amazing number of third-party plugins that developers around the world have built, and everything is made open source. You have access to a huge number of plugins that you can use in your applications. Now before we conclude this lecture, let's have a look at the application that we'll be building later in this course. We are going to build a simple task manager or to-do application in this course. Like any other application, this application will also have a simple login that will allow the users of our application to log into the application, and if the users do not have an account, they will have to create an account first within the application. Once they have created an account, they can use those credentials to log into the application. Once they are logged into the application, a list of all the existing to-do items or tasks will be displayed to them. On this screen, they can manage their tasks, they can delete any task that they want, and they can also mark any pending tasks as completed. Once a task has been marked as completed, it will no longer be displayed in this list. A user can also add new items to this list so that they can keep track of their tasks. To do that, they will click on the floating action button to add a new task, and then they will fill out all the required fields. Once they fill out all the required fields, they can click on save, and the newly created task will be added to the list of tasks on the main application page. From here, they can manage this newly created task as well. When they are done, they can simply log out of the application. We'll be building this application using Ionic 4, which is the latest version of Ionic. But before we get started with building this application, we need to learn the basics of Ionic 4. And since we'll be using Firebase as the backend of our application, in the next video we'll understand what is Firebase.